or so. Welcome, my fellow Americans. This is the Black Powder Podcast. I am your host, along with my lack of melanated brother, Eric Parker, and we are here today bringing you the liberty type shit that you need in your life. And I don't say that lightly. This is a libertarian podcast. We run a libertarian page on Facebook and other platforms, and we are uncompromising in the fact that we will push this libertarian agenda as hard as the duopoly sells you the fear that they sell you. We're going to sell you the liberty that you deserve. And like I said previously, I'm here with my guy, Eric Parker. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, what's up? How's it going? Eric Parker here, coming in live to you from High Point, North Carolina. Real quick, just a shout out to Hornytown Gun and Ammo, right down the street in Hornytown, North Carolina. So had to rep. They're right down the street from me, probably the closest FFL to me. You can go there. They're a small shop, but they got a lot of good deals, and they're an FFL if you want to purchase anything online and you live near High Point, Greensboro, Kernersville, Winston-Salem. Make sure to stop in a Hornytown Gun and Ammo. They got dope hats like this and other stuff like that. All right, Marcus, take it away.
Well, I think we got other people that we need to pay the bills with. Do you want to expand on that real quick?
Yeah, shout out to 1776 Swag. They got some awesome merch. Go check them out, 1776swag.com. And what's the other firearms?
Common Arm Trade Company down there in Florida, where my co-host used to live until he moved to the Carolina with the second best flag.
Hey,
in the
Mike Ross is gonna fix that whenever he becomes governor. By the way,
yes,
I think we covered everyone, right? There like what's the Firearms Network radio? News
Firearms Radio Network. Yeah, that's where we're also hosted there. We need to update a lot of stuff there, but we are still can be found on Firearms Radio Network. And I want to get into our guests because we always have the best libertarian guests on that we could get, and we actually aggressively pursue this. Today we have on North Carolina Governor hopeful for the Libertarian Party, my guy that I met 25 minutes ago, and we've already bonded over the simple fact this is about liberty, as you can see on my shirt available on the Black Powder Podcast. Liberty. Mike Ross, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me on. Good to see you, Eric, and it was great meeting you this past weekend at the convention. And I'm sorry for my voice. I had to deal with it at convention, so now your viewers have to hear me here. I kind of made the joke earlier, but I sound like RFK. But he has to deal with it a lot longer than I do. Hopefully, I'll sound like myself again soon.
Real quick, I was just assuming with your voice you had a normal libertarian conversation. When libertarians talk, it tends to get very animated, and everybody has a point of view that not necessarily melds with your fellow libertarian. So I'm going to assume you were screaming and yelling at these guys on why your position is the best position. Are you that type of libertarian that well, tell us about yourself?
Yeah. So, really, I'm not one who ever thought I would run for governor. At the end of the day, I'm a small business owner. I'm a homeschool dad, so I educate my kid, and I'm really kind of a homebody. I want to stay at home in my community. And a few years ago is kind of when I started getting involved political, when I just saw my local government do something so horrific that I was just like, whoa. Let me go talk to my local city council about this and see what they had to say. And that's kind of what kicked it off. And I went out and I just kind of said, hey, can you guys look into this case? And nobody said anything, never heard back. And I couldn't really shake what happened. So there was a homeless veteran, right? And the cops tased his service dog during an arrest over like panhandling. And our laws in the state are backwards, guys. Like in order to get body cam footage here, a judge has to approve it. So here's a homeless guy. He's already living on the street, right? we had to help raise $30,000 just to get the legal fees to pay this off and bring it on. So that caused me to kind of become an activist. I just kind of backed my way into it. So I started organizing locally in my community, and it caught the wind of somebody who I respect a lot, who brought a ton of attention to this movement, and it's Spike Cohen, right? Spike Cohen and You Are the Power picked it up, brought a ton of national attention there. And that local activism, I think, ultimately we now have a federal lawsuit against the city of Gastonia for Joshua Rohrer. The cops are using qualified immunity, which we always know they're going to try. But it's on First Amendment grounds, and a nonprofit law firm picked it up. And then the church, who was under attack by the city, he was facing 5-digit fines just for feeding and helping the homeless community, as a church. And he credits us with basically being the reason he's still operating today. So out of those rallies, I think around rally 7, some libertarians said, Mike, you're speaking to city council so much. We want you to be the messenger for liberty and run for governor. And I kind of laughed about it. I'm like, I'm all about decentral local control. Like, libertarians should be focusing on, city council races, things like that. And I kind of laughed about it. And then by the 9th rally, a couple more people just kind of kept dripping at that. And I said, well, if you guys will support me, and if I can get a team behind this, because there's no way in heck I could do anything like this by myself. I said, all right, I'll be the messenger if that's the role you want me to play. Right. And that's kind of how I got here to this governor run, a regular guy who wanted none of this 2 years ago. But I saw my government do something that just fired me up so bad. You guys kind of gave the plug. They're not asking me to plug, but it's a Project to Heal hat, right? It's a nonprofit locally. They breed and donate service dogs to, vets with PTSD, special needs kids. So when I saw a homeless veteran had his service dog tased, when this is an organization that I'd, been a part of for so many years, that's why it just hit so close to home. And I think that that's something that the liberty movement can really use, whether it's through the party or any other element, is we need to get regular people to get off the sidelines of accepting kind of the status quo and joining together, right? At one point we had Republicans, Democrats, but it was the libertarians leading it. And because of that, a lifelong Democrat is now a registered libertarian, because he saw that, libertarians are the ones who will actually fight for our rights. So that's kind of what took me to where I am today, running for governor. And for that, I'm happy to chat about the platform or politics in North Carolina or anything you guys want to chat about. I don't want to just go through the normal bullet points of any old interview, because I got to put a hat and sunglasses on to join the club. But that's, that's how I came about it. I've been a small L libertarian my whole life. Ideologically, if we go deep down the philosophy of discussions, I think ideologically, I probably would have about 99% overlap with Javier Milei. And then I'm also an ANCAP, but I think that we're so far from that there's so many opportunities to get back to liberty, right? We had liberty in, 1776 when we set up a small, functional, limited constitutional government. I think it'd be great if we could get back to that, and then we could have those deeper philosophical thoughts. But right now we're so far from the vision of America and what made America so prosperous. I think we need to just start rolling back a little bit instead of letting that power continue to centralize.
Well,
yeah. So go ahead, Marcus.
I think it's interesting because when people mention the liberty flow chart as far as America goes, I think it actually ended at the Whiskey Rebellion, and that was under George Washington. Almost since the inception of this country, the government has been trying to roll back a lot of liberty that was hard fought and won. And that's why I think it's so important to showcase what libertarians mean and say and do in this day and age, 2024, in an election year cycle. And to have somebody on like Mike, I think that's just absolutely great. Eric, you were saying?
Well, I was just going to say, so Mike, you were specifically talking about Gastonia, North Carolina, right?
Yeah, Gastonia, North Carolina. Yep. I live in
So
Gaston County. Gastonia is basically where I shop, and we're right next to each other. So
gotcha. Okay. So how long have you lived in North Carolina? How long have you lived in that area?
So it's recently been a little more than half my life here in North Carolina, most of it in this area. I grew up in Florida. Um, spent
Yeah.
spent some time in Duval County, which I know
There you go.
is home for you, Eric. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's when I was 20, I moved up here, and
Gotcha.
now I'm 41, so finally more time in North Carolina than Florida, and it's nice to have seasons other than hot and hotter.
I hear you, bro.
Although,
And mosquito.
yeah, that's during both hot and hotter season, though.
I have to beg to differ. One time when I was in North Carolina with my son, who was playing baseball in Cary, I came back with 24 mosquito bites from North Carolina. So
Wow.
don't say it's any better than Florida. They both equally suck. That should be you guys' state bird.
But we only get them in summer here. They're year
Oh.
round in Florida.
That's
Right
true.
now, there's no mosquitoes here in North Carolina.
Yeah, because that was during July. And I just wanted to interject real quick because we talked about this a little in the pregame. I'm upset with both of you for not going to see my son play at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill this past weekend, where they got smoked by the Tar Heels, but they competed for a little bit. North Carolina is one of my favorite states. I got to be honest with you.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
It's growing on me. It's growing on me.
There's a lot of because North Carolina can be purplish, but generally it votes straight red. And, there's an untapped delegation of voters in North Carolina that don't go to the polls. And I saw that you actually spoke at a NAACP event. And that's where I think libertarians need to focus on that voting base, because Democrats and Republicans have, to me, they're on equal footing for the bullshit in the black community, the war on drugs, the social engineering of projects and all that shit. They're both there for me. They're both responsible for it. What is a message that you could send to the black voters in North Carolina to let them know how the Libertarian Party is actually home for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not big on identity politics, like as an idea, because I view it as a part of the tool that they use to divide us. So I generally try to look at things, and I struggle to kind of look at things there. But the reality is the black community has been, if I look at it as a group, has been attacked and really kind of done dirty by Republicans and Democrats for, I'm 41, my whole lifetime, a lot longer than that. Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think standing up for everyone's rights and ending the drug war, I think as a libertarian, if I focus on specific things I'm doing calling for with regard to policy in my platform, right? I'm calling to end the drug war, because that's something where you really see it, especially and it happens, not just in the black community, but in some of the rural, poor white areas where you've got meth running rampant. Like, drugs are everywhere in every single community, but the policing of it and a lot of the criminality seems to be primarily in the cities, right? In predominantly black areas, at least as far as the enforcement, right? Like, I look at the statistics in Gastonia, and then I look at the Gastonia arrest inquiry that shows everybody that's getting arrested in Gastonia, and it certainly seems to be racially enforced. I can't say it with certainty because of statistics, but there's something there. And I think if you end the drug war, that in and of itself will end a lot of the over policing. And you also need to really look at it as a two-way issue, right? A lot of people don't do that. I had an event called Dining with Democracy that I did in Gastonia. So Pastor Moses, my libertarian friend, who's running a church that feeds the homeless, he invited me to an event called Dining for Democracy. And it was all Democrat speakers who are running in this November election, right? Including Senator Hunt, who's the lieutenant governor candidate for the Democrat, Justice Riggs, who's I guess a current Supreme Court justice who's running for re-election. Their attorney general candidate was supposed to be there, Jeff Jackson, who's currently one of our congressmen, but he didn't show. But someone asked the question about school shootings and violence in schools, right? Because that's something that a lot of times people kind of point at the school shootings that they publicize, right? Where a specific weapon is used. But you talk about gang relating shootings in schools. That's something that, this was another room where it was a room full of mostly Black people. And this was a question that they asked. And it seemed like the Democrats were afraid to answer it. And I was happy to take the libertarian position, and I got claps to that position. And that position is really simple. We need to protect our children, right? Like at the end of the day, counting on the police to come in a matter of minutes is never going to protect your children. But we need to make sure that our 1A rights are protected, our 2A rights are protected, and let communities find solutions for themselves. Because I can tell you there's probably some military dads or granddads who are retired who would be more than happy to go up there and do that as their mission in certain areas. And that wouldn't cost the taxpayers anything, because I'm big on the idea of local communities solving problems themselves. And I think that that's a lot of overlap that you see just in some of the things I even see Democrats in some places pushing for, where, they hype it up and use the polarizing language around like defund the police, right? Well, there's certain communities where they're calling for community policing, and they want to do that. If that's what the community wants and that's what they think is a better solution, I don't think that the state government or the federal government should be dictating top down how communities run themselves. And I think that libertarians, offering economic freedom, that's not even counting the bigger libertarian issues, right? I don't think I would want to bring up the Federal Reserve, if I go to another NAACP event, even though I think that is something that is really the root cause of many of our problems. It's not something that, if you're not an econ nerd like me, that you'll get excited talking about. But I think if you talk about the actual impact of policing, specifically in the drug war, I think that resonates, because so many people fall into a situation where you're not only plundering from that person, where you're getting fines after fines going into the criminal justice system, but they're calling a family member. Hey, can you help me with this? Hey, my car got it. The amount of resources that are pulled out of less wealthy communities in this country to keep the poor, on top of the fact that the Federal Reserve is inflating everything that we have away, and you cling to appreciating assets in the hope that you can keep pace with it. There's a lot of overlap within libertarian circles, and I think that to some extent that's being tapped into, right? Like what Maj Touré is doing up in Philly. Some people in the liberty movement are, successfully reaching the Black community. I don't know. I don't know if I have the cred to do that as a guy who looks like basic white guy. I mean, I could pull up my ancestry DNA. I'm actually half Puerto Rican. You can't tell, but I am. My DNA says I'm a huge mix of everything. So
yeah, I could. You had that
Espanol.
Un poquito.
I would say to that was quite excellent. This isn't a podcast, and I don't necessarily believe in identity politics too, but there's just some plain simple facts with America that we have to address, and you addressed a lot of them right there. That
what else can I address?
Well, because I don't know, you probably didn't watch our end of the year episode. My whole thing was outreach to new voters, because I think libertarians don't look to expand their base in the right directions necessarily, because with the Mises Caucus and all that stuff, we kind of contracted a tad bit to me. And I believe in the minarchism, Eric, where the incremental stuff.
Incrementalism,
incrementalism. One of those steps is to do outreach to different communities to sell the message, because I think the duopoly is a complete and utter failure in every sense of that term. And it is high time that we look to expand the base, because when I go to libertarian events, I kind of stand out. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Marcus, can I challenge you real quick? You used a word I
Absolutely.
hate. So you used the word duopoly. You can see from my campaign, I use Fire the Uniparty. And let me explain why I go with Uniparty instead of duopoly, because duopoly was used for a long time. And this is something I would have convinced North Carolina voters about too, because it's the root cause of why I think their vote in the Libertarian primary on March 5th is far better than they can do in the Republican or the Democrat primary. Because right now, I think there's a candidate who's progressive, and I think that a lot of that community may support, and I debated him, and that's Justice Mike Morgan. And I think he's a good guy. I think he's not the one who DC wants. But the same thing I think in the GOP primary, we're going to be stuck with with Robinson and Josh Stein. That's going to happen in North Carolina. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. But I would argue if those two, if that's the match they're setting up for us, the reality is they're both funneling up to DC, and everybody in DC, in the Republican or the Democrat Party, the same mega donors are behind them. They're funding both sides. So even if you get a few people, you see it sometimes when you get like an anti-war vote in Congress, right? There's a few Republicans, a few Democrats that vote against it and do the principled thing that I think both parties' bases want. And then you see this huge glut of guys and gals with the same donors behind them that ram through these bills that destroy our country. That same money is funneling all of these, and the same operatives and their networks are going to be out going for those. But if they come out and, a couple 100,000 people choose to vote in the Libertarian primary, or the last one in like 2014, like 2,000 people voted in that primary. Can you imagine the statement that sends not only to Raleigh, but to DC? That a couple 100,000 people in this state are like, we're sick of it. And that's the reason I have to try and press the idea of the uniparty, because the controllers are behind it. The duopoly tells you that they're different. And if they're different, you might start to assign weight like, oh, well, I have to give one of these. It doesn't matter which one we get in there. None of them are going to stop the wars. None of them are going to stop the printing. None of them are going to stop the grift that goes on at every layer, where they're funneling money to their contractor friends and their donor class and signing laws for the lobbyists to come in and exploit and use regulatory capture. That's going to happen if you let them divide us. And the duopoly wording, it's subtle. But when I think about that, it makes you think that there's two. There's not two. It's really one. And the only way we can do anything about it is if we all unite against the one. So that's my one thing. I used to use duopoly, and then I said the uniparty. It just speaks more to the reality of what we're fighting. Because so many people are like, well, do you like Trump or Biden better? They ask me that. And I say, because I'm going to support the Libertarian. And I say, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. You think it's different. They have different entertainment value, but we're going to get the same thing. You might get a few things different, but we're still getting screwed either way. So.
Hey, Mike, real quick, just so that people don't know, may not realize, you're talking about no party affiliated or independent voters in North Carolina and their ability to vote for a Libertarian right now.
Yes.
Because a lot of people watching this podcast might not be from North Carolina. A lot of people that are from North Carolina that might be watching it might not realize that they can go to their closest election location and choose the Libertarian ballot. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, right now we're in early voting. The primary is March 5th, but if you're an unaffiliated voter, so you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, you're not a Libertarian, when you go in, you can say, I want to vote today. And they're going to ask you, which primary do you want to vote in? You can ask for Republican, you could ask for Democrat, you could ask for Libertarian. If you ask for Libertarian, they may try to talk you out of it or tell you something like, oh, we don't have enough for those printed. If you ask for a Libertarian ballot, make sure they give you a Libertarian ballot and vote for me, right? If you're in North Carolina, if you like what I'm saying, if you don't, if you like someone in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, vote for who you like. I'm just making the case that it doesn't really matter if you vote in their primary, because you're fighting something, between Robinson and Stein and the super PACs that are behind, and they're expecting between $150 to $200 million to be spent to determine who rules you in North Carolina as governor. Dale Folwell, the Republican, if I was a registered Republican, I'd probably vote for Dale Folwell. If I was a registered Democrat, I'd probably vote for Mike Morgan for governor, because those are the two guys that DC doesn't seem to want. So just as like a contrarian, as a Libertarian, I'm like, whoever DC doesn't want, that's probably better for the people, because I don't think what the people in power in DC want is for the betterment of regular people. I really don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Some people think that's pessimistic of me. Some people think I'm maybe too negative, but I truly think that our system has become so perverted by money and corruption over the course of, the last 100 years that we become a beast so big. And, I'm big on economics, right? I'm a financial planner by trade. I got a few wealthy clients that keep the lights on kind of thing. Thankfully, I'm blessed that my wife has a good job too. But I really enjoy working with clients that really I make no money from, right? But other advisors who won't help them. But if I can help educate them and know that in 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to be in a much better place, I feel like I'm doing something other than just helping the rich get richer, right? Because I feel like that's something that I think we all want purpose in the things we do, right? That's why I try to find charities to work with and stuff like that. And as a financial planner and investment manager, it's like, I help the rich get richer in a capitalist system, right? But I have friends who are socialists, and I'm not going to coddle you there. I'm going to come with economic truth, and we can disagree on that and work together on other things. But I like to have some purpose that comes out of what I'm doing. And the thing that worries me, and this is something that some of my clients have challenged me, and I hope I don't say something that gets me in trouble with any of the regulatory agencies, but I'm just going to say it because I worry that if they keep going down this path, if all of the historical data and all of the things that I need to be doing as a fiduciary, if they can crumble all of that, right? And if there's anything we can do there, and that's something that really scares me, is if the collapse does come, how do I do that professional, right? And you can't, I guess that all comes down to individual various levels of prepping, right? And guns and ammo and canned goods and stuff like that. But I can't really, recommend that as a planner for everybody to take what they've been saving and put it all into something like that, because you can't really bet on the collapse. But that's something that does scare me a little bit. And, hopefully I've seen what happened, right? Just look at Argentina. Javier Milei was elected in December. They have the first balanced budget and surplus in how long in Argentina? And that's a country that was like ravaged by socialism for 100 years. And the idea of socialism is so noble, and I see why it lures so many people in, right? It's this idea of, well, we get to take care of everybody and everybody has things, but you can't do that in a real world. As long as resources are scarce, right? That you don't have just infinite everything, and it has to be done. And economically, they couldn't run. They destroyed their country economically, and Javier Milei won with 56% of the vote. It was mostly the poor, right? How often do people tell us, libertarians are just selfish, your ideas are just to make the rich richer? That's just objectively not true. And that's the thing that, is kind of giving me hope in this. I think the liberty movement has a big win between what's happening in Argentina and I see growth in the state. If anybody is in North Carolina, we're running more candidates this year than a long time. I think 50 candidates. So there may be more than just, there's one district in the state where there's actually another libertarian primary, not a statewide race, but in November, if you're sick of the uniparty, look for the libertarians, be an engaged voter, look at their platform. If you watch this podcast, there's a whole bunch of different libertarians. We all have different things that we believe, but we generally have the same core principles that unite us. And really, I feel like any libertarian is going to be better than anybody from the uniparty, because they at least are trying to work for the people instead of the special interests.
I concur. At the bare minimum, what you'll get out of a libertarian candidate is somebody who will see you as the individual that you are, and you will be the person that, as long as you're doing no harm, I think all libertarians, Mises and otherwise, can agree on that firm principle: do no harm. Now, I wanted to talk about as far as education.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I work for a public education agency, and what I've seen is this push for college. Everything is about college, college, college.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with a superintendent, and I said the first 2 years of high school need to be the basics: math, writing, English, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, if you're going to go to college, you should take college prep courses. But college isn't for everybody. It's less than 30% of our population, and even lower who graduates as far as percentage.
Right.
Why can't we, as libertarians, put the trade model where high school is more similar to a junior college than a high school? The first 2 years, you make sure you can do all the basics. Second 2 years, you either take college prep or take trade classes. Would you endorse that type of position in public education?
Yeah. So boy, I've actually got my own education's a big part of my platform.
Hmm.
So from public, but I'd love to tie it into college and big picture because the idea, the same things and vision for my idea and my education plan for the state of North Carolina, I think apply to college level and really all education, right? So North Carolina's public education is constitutionally mandated, right? It's in our constitution that the state provides an education to all children, but at least here in a lot of places our public education system is failing. I know that there's a lot of good schools in California, but I'm sure there's a lot of struggling schools in
Yeah.
California as well. I think there's probably a lot of good schools and a lot of struggling schools everywhere in the public school system. But I'm once again when looking at things through decision making, whether it's because I'm a financial planner through my whole career, or the fact that I love economics and I'm very much of the Austrian economics school and believing in free markets. My education plan says, it's the biggest expenditure within our state is education. We spend about $13,000 per student in our state. And when you look at some districts in our state, they have, 5% literacy and math on grade level for some ninth graders. And their goal is to get it to 25%. That's a failure. Like to me, I look at it as data. You're aspiring to 25%. To me, that says the system is broken, whether it's too many students, not enough one-on-one attention. But when you break down 13,000 per students, when I look at least in North Carolina, but I would think most places of public education, there's a lot of bloat in the system where the actual producers, right? The teachers, those are the ones who are most involved in the production of the service or good, if we call it a public good of education. Our teachers get paid crap in our
True.
state. And
Yeah.
and the reason, when you think of it there, like if you just look at it from a free market standpoint and say, hey, if every parent said, I'm going to send my kid to get an education wherever the hell I want to send my kid to get an education, whether it's a community school with that old retired teacher down the street who is a good, and she just decides to say, I'm going to take 10 students and run a micro school out of my house. You don't have a teacher operating on a $130,000 budget for 10 kids. And that's just one of an infinite number of free market ideas that could come out to compete for education dollars. And I believe that in a true free market where there's competition, it puts downward pressure on price and upward pressure on quality. And when you have a system that's failing as hard as the public education system is, at least in North Carolina, I think competition's good because the public schools will either have to get rid of the bloat, compensate the teachers better, do whatever it takes to get better results, or they'll put themselves out of business and abolish themselves, and then we'll just see more downward pressure there. But at the end of the day, the idea that we're creating a monopoly when that monopoly is producing some of the most abysmal results you can imagine. I mean, as a homeschool dad, I probably spend maybe $1,000 a year to educate my kid. He comes in, he's testing above grade level in all the standardized tests that we do. I'm not saying homeschooling works for everybody, but I'll tell you what, smaller class sizes tend to work for everybody, at least show better improvement, right? And if you change the economics where if you had, 10 kids on a $130,000 baseline of say a micro school, maybe you have a teacher who only wants to take 5 students and gets half of that. That's still a $65,000 salary to a teacher who's only taking 5 kids. That kind of hands-on free market education, I think, can actually create generational shift where we're preparing our next generation to contribute in a free market. And if you do that long term, that's the reason I think that, the people in Argentina bought into what Milei was saying, because it's based on economic truth. And if you do this for a long time and you allow the free market to actually hit the masses, and you stop the Federal Reserve from inflating it away and giving all of these punitory fees that are used to keep the poor, the free market will build up for everybody, but only if you let it. If for no other reason then I believe it for no other reason than the evidence I've seen, right? The evidence I've seen in the actions that government takes. I think everybody, regardless of where you are in this country, right? And this shouldn't be everybody would like it if there was no homeless, right? That's a good goal. The government will never do that. They are not capable of doing that. I don't care how much money you give them. They will not do that. But people who are actually solving the problems and trying to solve it, the government is actually getting in the way and stopping that. I've seen that here in Gastonia with what happened to Pastor Moses, with You're the Power down in South Carolina. Erica Brown was just feeding the homeless and the government was trying to stop them. And it makes me think, why is the government doing this, right? We have free market, charities, churches, individuals, activists who are trying to solve problems. They're not hurting anybody. They're using private resources. They're not. Why would the government stop that? And this is something that Spike told me. It's because I struggled with this because it's hard to believe, but Spike tells it to me every time I have this conversation with Spike. But it's because they don't want to solve the problem. The problem benefits them to have it there. And I struggle with that because I'm a good person and I'm a libertarian, but maybe they're not all good people.
They're not.
And if you get rid of the problem, you get rid of their worth or how they feel their self-worth, the dependency on the government. If the problem doesn't exist, which we've seen, charities and nonprofits or even for-profits fix more problems than the government, you know what I mean? Then there's not as much of a need for the government. So
that's how they justify their existence. That's solely the reason, because it's no longer about the best idea. It's about fear. It's about telling you if we don't take care of this, somebody's going to come in your house and lick your ass and eat all your Cheerios. And you may not want them to lick your ass.
I don't get that analogy.
Yeah, how do you not get that? Do you want somebody coming in your house licking your ass? No.
Well, no.
Yeah. And that's what the government does. That is a tad bit of a stretch, but the government is literally trying to stop you from existing without them.
What the government does is painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to let the cat out of the bag, and I will always take credit for elevating Cohen to where he is now, but he's coming on March 13th on the Black Powder podcast again. I think this is his third time on and whatnot. And I take credit because after I endorsed him and Vermin Supreme, Spike blew up. And I guarantee you, every time he comes on, I have to mention that. But the thing in Gastonia was one of the first things for You Are the Power. And it was such a tragic event that catapulted him and that organization to where it is now, where they're actually fighting for real Americans. That's the libertarian message. That's what we do. Because Democrats and Republicans are going to tell you, hey, those cops were protecting you from this guy. But they're not going to have any nuance. They're not going to have any facts. They're just going to say our heroes, and this all started after 9/11. You can't question heroes. You can't question the government because the government is that omnipotent power that stands in front of you that protects you from all, like that meme with all the daggers and whatnot, and that guy standing there like that, and you're sleeping. Yeah, that's what the government has projected itself to be. And that's why we need to support libertarian candidates like Mike Ross that are going to actually be that shield against those government daggers and arrows while you want to live your life. And Americans have a distorted view of what life is. They all they feel is like if you can go to what do you call it? What's that? Sonic, and get your cheeseburger and chicken nugget combo with the fancy drink for $4.99 or whatever it is now. They just want that comfortable life.
Hold up. You're gonna shout out Sonic and not call out getting a foot-long chili cheese dog? Come on, man.
My bad. We don't really have Sonics where I live. We have more McDonald's and Jack. My bad,
dude.
They keep money. We won't be able to have.
I have one.
Exactly.
The chili. This is this is what frustrates me about America is we don't actually give libertarians a chance to listen to what they're actually saying, because they say you're wasting your vote. I say you're wasting your vote if you're voting for the same shit over and over again and
100%.
expecting different results. You're insane.
Yep.
So
Or heavily
I w-
propagandized, maybe both.
indeed, and
Hey.
that's why I talk about the public education system, because there's an intended product, and that's the vast majority of Democrat and Republican uniparty
And,
voters.
I love
and
it. I love it.
uh,
Uniparty. Thank you, Marcus.
Uniparty. A lot of people don't realize, like, education might be, and I don't know, I haven't looked at North Carolina's books, I'm sure you have, but it's basically the most expensive part of our state government, right?
It is.
Or it might be,
It
and
is.
then
It's
after
the most
that,
expensive part of our state government.
yes. Now, would you say the second largest is welfare, healthcare, insurance? What's our second? You nailed education. You did a great job. What is the second most important part of your platform that you want to discuss with us tonight?
I mean, it goes in line with that, right? Platform wise, I know what the data is, right? The polling, because I'm an analyst. I pay attention to these things. And the three most important things, if you believe the polls, and when I think about them rationally, I think it makes sense, are health, education, healthcare, and the economy. So when it comes to the economy, I think that's there's some low hanging fruit for places that we can advocate for. I haven't put any in concrete, so this might actually kind of be groundbreaking, because at the end of the day, I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours and hours building policy, because I'm a libertarian running for a statewide office who believes mostly in localism, right? It could happen. And the more people that participate in the libertarian primary, which I think is kind of like the perfect low stakes opportunity, all you unaffiliated voters, come vote for me. If you don't believe what we're doing, you could still change your mind in November. I hope you don't, because that game's rigged too. But come vote in this primary. And when it comes to the economy, there are states in this country that operate with no income tax, and they operate just fine. And the Republicans in our state are trying to pretend that they're fiscally responsible and care about this. So they're lowering our state income tax from 5% to 2.5%, right? Cutting it in half. And I'll say, hey, that's a good. Anytime you lower any tax, I'm happy with that, because I would love to see all taxation completely abolished, ideologically, right? But again, you have to make things work in a pragmatic way that minimizes harm to society through your actions. But why can't we work to get to 0%? Right? Other states do that, but the whole idea of a tax, if you look how it's been used historically, right? You tend to tax things, and New York's a good example. Thankfully, I'm sure, Marcus, I'm sure you can give me a California example of this, but in New York, it was a big news where they're like, hey, we're going to tax large sodas. Why are they taxing large sodas? Well, because they know that by taxing something, people are going to do less of it, right? Make it more expensive.
Syntax. Yeah.
Why are we taxing productivity in America? Why are we saying, go be productive? We're going to disincentivize you going and doing that. Like that's the whole reason that black markets pop off in some things that like don't even need to be a black market, just because the tax burden can be too high. So I want to see any kind of these taxes and fees. I can't do anything about the Fed as governor other than call for an audit every single day if I have to.
And you're willing to do that?
Well,
If somehow they put me in this office, Eric, I'm going to be a thorn in the side of both parties in DC on a daily basis. And I've got good insurance and a will in my state planning affairs in order, because
well,
I
the
wouldn't be surprised
premise,
if they go that route.
yeah, the premise of a sin tax, because California put a $5 sin tax on cigarettes a few years back, and they say this will disrupt people's behaviors, and they actually do work. And I hate to say that, but they do. But the problem with that is, like, the state of California that $5 per cigarette pack sin tax was supposed to fund programs, anti-smoking programs, and things of that nature. So when that sin tax becomes productive and people stop smoking, those programs start to see a budget deficit because people are no longer doing that habit. So the state of California has to look for other means to fund those programs now, and which turns into not a sin tax, but a regular tax that where they take money from people. And that is what the Uniparty completely doesn't understand. When you do these things, they may sound like good ideas, but if you attach a dollar value to these so-called ideas that you have that are for the better public good, and when they start taking effect, you cause budget deficits. In California, with all its grand ideas, is now the budget deficit has been revised from 38 million to 70, excuse me, 38 billion to 73 billion now, because they have all these obligations that these politicians have promised and put forth with their better society ideas, the social engineering to which I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
This is that social engineering failing.
Yeah, no, and I think that those are good things, right? Like if we could get people to smoke less as a society, that's fantastic, right? It lowers the overall healthcare burden. It like there's economic calculations in all of these things, and I don't want to like discount the values of those. I just think that the idea of government trying to centrally plan these things is a
Right.
completely failed idea. And in a perfect world, I would see if all of that goes away, because we see a similar thing. I hate to jump back to education. It just, what you said made me think of the reality of the education system in North Carolina. So we have the education lottery, right? So people are like, you know, even though I joke and say the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math, but at least it's voluntary, right?
Yeah.
Because statistically, like you're going to lose money, right? Some people win, but statistically in aggregate, you lose money in the lottery. But the way it works in our state is the General Assembly sets a budget, the governor signs it and says, hey, we're going to have 10 billion for education, right? And then let's say the lottery's like, well, here's $1 billion that we're flooding into this system. So now you would think, okay, we have 11 billion for education, but the reality is the General Assembly looks at it and says, oh, well, 1 billion of that that 10 billion we budgeted for education came in from there. So we'll just reallocate and we only need to put 9 billion to education. So 10 billion still. So the people of North Carolina like think they're doing something good for education, and really they're just pushing money around that the General Assembly is going to pull in and spend on whatever the heck they want, wherever the shortfall is caused by, you know, the syntax budget shortfall on things like that. Where if you get the government out of all of those things, I believe that the free market would work. Right? There's enough groups out there that would push education on why you shouldn't smoke and the dangers of drugs and all of these things. I just think that that private citizens who take things like risk into account, right? When you have a blank check because it's funded through a monopoly of taxation, you don't have to think of, well, what if this doesn't work? Or what if there's a better way? Right? You just, hey, I've got this idea. Maybe it'll work. Let's do it. Oh, it's only $12 billion. Well, it's not like it was my $12 billion, where if you're trying to do that and you're a startup and you're like, hey, we've got like $7 million. We did this thing. How can we make the most impact to reduce smoking in the Charlotte area? And you might do things like little small tests of A/B testing on these ad versus this ad. The government's not going to do that because they don't have to. They're not accountable. There's no risk. And that's where I think for really anything. And again, you know, I'm not calling for the abolition of like any of these things because I'm ideologically an ANCAP, but we're so far from where that is. We need to look very pragmatically about how we roll things and how we get there. You know, like come back to a constitutional republic. Then we'll work together towards like the minarchist goals. And then once everybody's happy with minarchy, then I guess I'll have to make the case for anarchy. But we're so far from that right now. How do we just make tangible things to move as much as we could to the free market so that people can get out from under the economic tyranny that happens? Because you have unmatched class mobility in the United States. I truly still believe that compared to most places in the world where you can be poor with nothing if you work hard, and not always, right? But that opportunity, there's so many places in the world where you'll never get that opportunity. And I believe that if we were to actually focus our economy and our governance on allowing that opportunity to create prosperity and get the government to stop doing all the things that get in the way and force people to be poor, force people in traps, the school to prison pipeline, like that's real. Like there's all these things that the government is doing that is preventing that. And that's some of the things. I don't want to get into the conspiracies on, whether it's whether that's by design or if that's just the natural economic incentives or any of that. I just want it to bring more freedom and liberty, because deep down, from everything I've studied as a professional, I believe that would work if we could just get the government off of everybody's back and work together, put more control locally, and let communities fix these problems, because the government can't, but communities can. We've done it for thousands of years as humans.
Keep
Mike,
going, Eric. I'll be right back.
All right, yeah. Hey, Mike, real quick, could you touch on your platform? Keep it under a minute because I got some more questions. Let's get them in as fast as we can. But on healthcare, however your platform touches healthcare, the healthcare system, or health in the state of North Carolina. 1 minute, go.
Yeah, we'll get it down to bullet points, right?
All right.
First off, general philosophy: get the government as far away from healthcare as they can, as systematically and thoroughly as possible. End certificate of need.
Yes.
Okay. End certificate of need. End restrictions on medication. If someone wants medication, I don't care what country it comes from, what state it comes from, where they get it. End anything that makes that harder or more expensive. Let the free market in medicine work. And let's go with another super important thing: price transparency. Healthcare is the one thing that we buy that we have no idea how much it costs. That has to stop immediately. We have to know how much it costs, because the problem, again, with a lot of it, when you get government and insurance and all of these mega corporations in there, it's a blank check. And sadly, we're forced to pay for much of it. Bring the free market to healthcare.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure direct primary care is legal in North Carolina, but I have not noticed a large amount of direct primary care facilities available. Don't know if you know anything about that. This might be a conversation for after the podcast if you don't, but you've heard of direct primary care, correct?
Yeah, I haven't really put a ton of thought policy-wise, so I don't know enough about that one. I'd want to get a little more knowledge on direct care as far as whether I want to adopt it into the platform. I'm kind of on the healthcare. I've been sticking to those three.
Yeah,
that I see immediate needs for.
So, and I'm pretty sure it's available in North Carolina. I'm just saying, like, moving forward, or if I could, anyways, we could talk about it later. But essentially, it's a subscription program. You go straight. You just pay a monthly fee to a doctor. You avoid insurance altogether. You don't use your insurance for it, but it's only for direct primary care. It's not for emergencies or that sort of thing. You just pay a monthly subscription, essentially, to a doctor. You get to see him as many times as you want. Sometimes it could be just telehealth if it's for a prescription or something like that. Anyways,
I don't think the government has any business in any of that. Let the free market decide what healthcare looks like. If doctors want to model their business models however they want, go compete.
All right,
That's
Marcus.
That's actually called capitation. I used to work for HMO. So the HMO would pay the doctors a monthly fee, and the doctors would have to take care of those patients, regardless of how many times they showed up. The HMO gave them their money. So there is a business model for that, but there is all we need to do is remove the middleman, which is the HMO. So I kind of
exactly.
So
hey, Marcus, ask them to answer any question in 1 minute. Whatever topic you're interested in, go ahead.
Yeah. So in the first 3 days of a Mike Ross governorship, what would be your priorities in executive action or passing legislatively?
Yeah. So first thing, what I do the first 3 days is the same thing I would do every day. So every single nonviolent drug offense in the state of New York or North Carolina that comes across my desk, I'm going to mass pardon starting on day one. And I will do that every single day because as weak as the governor's office is, because we have a weak governor model in our state, they still have the power of the pardon. And if the legislature won't end the war on drugs, I will end the war on drugs by pardoning every single arrest across the state under a state related drug crime so that the cops will stop enforcing it. Hopefully that frees them up to actually go after violent criminals and protect and serve our communities like we all want them to, right? At the end of the day. I would then look to federal law, right? Any federal law. I am a big believer in nullification. I believe in the founding documents of this country. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the 10th Amendment. And I think that federal laws that make things worse for North Carolinians that we are being forced to enforce, I would sign executive orders essentially saying that we are nullifying these laws. At the end of the day, I'm a libertarian. We have a very weak model. So I would try to go the route that Javier Milei is doing there in Argentina, right? They're not saying, they said he couldn't get anything done because he doesn't have the legislature. I won't have the legislature. But if I'm elected, that's a mandate that many people would vote outside of their system. So I would say to the legislature, deliver on all of my platform. Send me bills in line with all of my platform. Let's pass it for the people of North Carolina. Either that or in 2 years, we're going to field a whole bunch of libertarians and we're going to take that energy and, that I'm passed and bring that into the next election and replace all of them.
All right, Mike, real quick, touch on the ABC liquor laws in North Carolina and how you're going to fix that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go straight up and say this one. And some people would say I maybe shouldn't be as radical, but just abolish the ABC system in North Carolina. Let the free market work in liquor the same way it does. Why do we need the government to be in charge of selling all of the alcohol in our state? That's not a function or task that any of our founding fathers ever imagined the government would be doing. So let's stop doing it and abolish that. Abolish.
I would only thing about that is I would beg to differ because George Washington in the Whiskey Rebellion, that those were men that were just simply selling their product, and the government came in and said, no, you have to pay taxes on your products from your stills. And
but what did the people do?
The people rebelled against it. And that's why America needs to understand that this isn't a necessarily armed conflict that we need to enter into, but this is a conflict that we need to fight. And I'm not saying hurt or kill any government agency. It's time to assert that this is a republic and it's of, for, and by the people. And that's why we have people like Mike Ross on the Black Powder podcast. So with that being said, can you tell everybody where they can reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So firetheuniparty.com is my campaign website. You can read anything about my major planks, dealing with government transparency, education, the economy, healthcare, police, criminal justice reform. It's all on there. You can find me on social media at Fire the Uniparty. We're trying to go pretty simple with the branding. So it's everywhere. And, at the end of the day, if enough of you come out and vote for me in the primary, we can scare them in both Raleigh and in DC. And if enough people vote for me in November, I can do everything I can while they let me have that pen to try to bring about liberty in North Carolina. So I'd appreciate your vote March 5th. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Eric, and your closing words?
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure meeting you this weekend. I'm happy to be here in North Carolina. I'm happy to be in good company. I'm excited about what the Libertarian Party of North Carolina is doing in this state. So appreciate you and your time. Thanks for coming on such last minute, but we loved it. So thank you.
Yeah,
indeed.
Thanks for letting me look cool with you guys.
Hey, anytime.
I would have definitely preferred you hung out with me this past weekend because I'm way cooler than Eric. But that's not personal. That's just my professional opinion.
Come to North Carolina. We're a great state. Next time you're in North Carolina, let me know and we'll get together.
What sucks is I was there around beginning of March. I was there in Cary last year, March 3rd, 5th, or something like that. And, I love meeting libertarians because there's one thing we can agree upon as far as fellow libertarians, and that's pretty much nothing. And that makes for great conversation. And
I mean, you are the only real libertarian after all,
I
right?
am the only real libertarian. Everybody else calling themselves a libertarian is a charlatan. And I feel great I didn't have the opportunity to speak on Lieutenant Governor Robinson, because I would have upset some people, because he's like my real life Uncle Ruckus. And I want to thank you for coming on, especially on this short notice. And I want to thank everybody who we only had a few, but we always get the stragglers. That's our main thing. We don't get necessarily the live audience, but we get the straggler audience. And so thank you very much for coming on. We're going to ask you to keep us in mind sometime after the primary, regardless of the results, and come back on and talk to us about where you think we are as a party and what we need to do. And as a black guy, I would listen to you. So don't worry about that other shit.
Okay.
Because I think I could speak for the entire black family. That's a bold statement in and of itself. And I can't back that with anything else, but I want to thank you because, like I said, this is not about identity politics. It's about libertarian and liberty realities.
Well, I mean, just on the anti-government skeptic, right? Like, aside from the Native Americans, no one's close as far as a group that should be distrustful of the government. Like what the government has done to black people is. Sorry if we're going over, but I mean,
no, Marcus says this every week.
Yeah,
and we agree with him. That's, I mean, you know what I mean.
Yes,
it's not like we don't disagree with him.
I mean, forcefully injecting people with syphilis. The government did that.
Well,
to black people.
To black people.
I tell you, I'm Generation X. I'm 51 years old.
Okay.
I tell people, if you really want to look at the reality of the matter, understand this. I am the first generation of black Americans that didn't grow up under slavery or Jim Crow. Because my dad grew up in Jim Crow, Alabama. Both my parents graduated from high school in 1968, went through segregated schools until the fall of 1968, where he attended SMU. That was the first time he was in an integrated classroom when he was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And I tell people not to look for empathy, but for the reality of the facts of the matter. This is where we are in America. We're not completely disengaged from that shit. The shit that you saw Martin Luther King went through in black and white, my dad saw it in color.
Yeah.
So I'm not, like I said, I'm not looking for empathy. I just want you to understand where we're at and where we're going. And we can't do that without the history of this country and moving forward, acknowledging that. You can't move forward and say, well, whatever. You have to move forward by acknowledging and going forward. That's the only thing I want to tell the people as far as race relations and shit like that, because there's a lot of shit that needs to be corrected in the black community. So with that being said,
that's a
thank
whole
you.
Episode.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to come back anytime you want, guys.
Yeah, for sure. I want to make that happen. Eric, do you have anything else?
Shout out to Horny Town Gun and Ammo.
Horny Town. All right. So, as we always end our podcast with the great refrain from the founders of this country, live free
or die.
Now the longest pause